Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a phenomenal show coming right up with special guest Thomas Hübl, and he's here today to talk to us about modern-day mysticism and the Celebrate Life Festival. Thomas is a visionary teacher, innovator, and founder of the pioneering Academy of Inner Science, which promotes the study and the principles of mysticism and human inner development. Today, Thomas is here to discuss with us modern-day mysticism and his upcoming event, Celebrate Life Festival. So let's welcome to the show, Thomas.
Oh, thank you for having me, Marianne. Thank you.
What a pleasure it is to have you here. And my goodness, you're quite the visionary teacher, I hear.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here with you and and your audience. Mm-hmm.
Well, and for a lot of our listeners that might be new to your work, why don't you share a little bit about your journey? Because I found it to be quite fascinating.
Yeah, so of course, I mean, yes, it's a bit of an unusual journey, maybe, because like I started off studying medicine in Vienna, and when I was 26, I left my studies and I went on to a 4-year meditation retreat, and that was a kind of a very deep time for me. Like I felt that I had such a strong calling that I need to let go of what I learned so far and to really spend some time. I didn't know at the beginning that it's going to be 4 years, of course, but eventually it turned out to be that long, and it was a very deep exploration of, let's say, consciousness, my consciousness, human consciousness, and I really learned a lot in this time. It was like another studying time. And so, eventually after some time I came out of that retreat, and I still spent almost another year in a small flat in an apartment in Vienna, still meditating many hours a day. And then one of my friends or clients at the time, invited me to see another spiritual teacher that came to Vienna. And when the teacher saw me and said some things about me, then people started to invite me to give workshops. And then my life suddenly completely changed from being in a very deep inward-oriented journey and contemplation, like in many hours a day in a contemplative state. And also at the end of these 4 years, I had a profound opening, I would say, or like something profound happened. And then my life changed from one day to the other. And then there were another 4 years where I just traveled with one suitcase and one computer throughout the whole world. And I gave a lot of one-on-one sessions. I gave many workshops. And then there was another 4 years of being very, very much out there. And then I got to know my current wife, and we took an apartment, and then my life changed again. So this was 14 years ago. And I think all the puzzle pieces in a way came together and formed the work that I do today, which combines whatever the healing and integration work with the deep spiritual and mystical work, with some cultural architecture work, like how do we really bring our spiritual practice into day-to-day life as parents, as people who affect culture, taking on also some cultural challenges and making a meaningful contribution. And so a lot of my work is about an grounded embodied spiritual practice that is also innovative and brings new creative solutions into the societal framework while practicing like a deep contemplative practice. We can go dive into some of the aspects deeper, but in order not to make it too long, that's it in a nutshell.
That's a short version. Well, and it's interesting, how your journey took you from, here you're going to go in the medical field, you're looking at that, and then you do a 180, because a lot of times when people are wired so that they are able to do medicine, they have to really see things to have it proven. And yet you took this inward journey.
Right. And my sense is that that the inner journey is also a scientific path, which means that that the exploration of human consciousness follows certain inner laws or certain inner processes. And so that's why later on we developed what we call today the Academy of Inner Science, like an institution where we run worldwide programs and training programs and online programs where we explore how what I call the inner science, like the contemplative science and outer science, the scientific path in different disciplines can meet. And in the meanwhile, we actually established with 6 universities PhD programs where people take our in-depth programs, like 2-year training programs, and write a PhD on a certain topic, and combine their inner experience and their scientific background and create PhD works out of it. So exactly what you mentioned, the polarity between outer science and inner science is actually what I feel is also one part of my journey to create a kind of a dialogue of the mystical voice, the inner voice, the contemplative voice, and the scientific approach, because I believe that the synthesis of both of them is really important and can bring many innovative ideas, solutions, and processes into our cultural process.
Well, and I have to applaud you. Not many people would take such extraordinary time to devote to their spiritual practice, and you did that. It seems like you knew that's what you were supposed to do, and you went with it. Were you ever at a point where you felt conflicted about pursuing your spiritual life?
Yes, of course, because I really loved medicine. I mean, I worked for 9 years as a volunteer paramedic for the Red Cross, and I spent a lot of time in the medical field, and I really loved it. It was very hard for me to leave it. It was not that, I didn't like it anymore and that's why I left it. This was not the reason. I just felt another very intense calling. And that's why, yes, it was not always an easy journey, but somehow I always knew that is what needs to happen. I somehow was clear, like when I felt myself, I felt that that's the right thing. And also now, after many years that I look back, I can really see how something carried me or guided me in a way through this 4 years, and like some deeper inner knowing that guided me also through the different practices that I did and the choreography of the 4 years. So looking back on it, it's kind of there's a red thread through the whole time, and that's beautiful. And then I think also that the power that made me do that step is in a way the power that kind of drives my whole work today. So for me, that was really an important time. It's not something that I recommend to many people, because that's not everybody's path. And in fact, for some time, I even hardly spoke about it in depth because I didn't want other people to copy it. Because I think we all need to find out what's really our journey. But for me, it was a very important time, very important study time.
Well, it seems that you have a very interesting perspective, being able to not only have visited all the countries that you did and seeing how different people live in their cultures, but also the spiritual aspect that each culture has and bringing that into the work that you do.
Yes. And in fact, first of all, I met many, like, let's say, spiritual leaders in different cultures and different religions. And so, I mean, I always, when I travel somewhere, I try to meet, people or leaders in their own field and have conversations and create collaborations. That's also how we created, for example, the Celebrate Life Festival that we did 14 years in Germany. And now it's the first year that's, it's coming to the US. Maybe we're going to talk about this a bit later. But that was a platform where I invited different teachers of different disciplines into dialogues and presented their work to the audience in Germany. And also that, somehow also my work in Europe, but later on in other parts of the world, really helped me to see that there's one topic that I besides now the deep spiritual part and the individual development work, but what I came to see, what I think is the next big wave in the whole healing field, is that in a way by accident, quotation marks, I came across, like, because it happened in my groups again and again and again, like this discharge of collective unconscious material. And then I started to get interested in it because it kept repeating itself. And then I came to see the magnitude and the large scale of what collective trauma means. I mean, also because I ran many retreats in Germany and in Central Europe, and very often we came to the Holocaust, to the Second World War, and then it started in the US with slavery and Native American genocide, and then whatever in other countries with different topics. But I believe that, and from what I have seen and researched in the last 15 years, that I think that there is a big ghost in the machine, and it's called collective trauma, and collective trauma that transmits itself throughout the generations. When in fact, last year at the Celebrate Life Festival, I invited a professor from a Swiss university as a speaker. She's a professor for epigenetics, and they already can prove in mice experiments how sperm cells transmit trauma from one generation to the next. And actually, if it's untreated, many generations after show the same symptoms, like the traumatized mice. And that, in fact, kind of just underlines what I've learned in my groups, that there is a dimension of traumatization that is not only individual, that is a social trauma, like a collective trauma. And I believe many questions in the healthcare field, in the social field, and in many fields actually, will find answers by us understanding deeper what most of us have been born into. Like that collective trauma field that we have been born into. And that's why it's so normal to us, because we don't know life any other way. And I think that has a huge implication that is often outside of the range of our nervous system's capacity to perceive. We might know this intellectually, but we might not have a direct experience of what that means. And after many of these collective trauma processes that I have seen, and once we really as a group experience the dimension of a collective denial or a collective suppression or a collective unconscious field, I think my travels also taught me that besides the different spiritual paths, but that's kind of, that became a passion of mine. We actually, my wife and I, created 2 years ago, after doing this for almost 15 years now, we created a global nonprofit that researches and get establishes in many countries around the world collective trauma pockets. We call it the Pocket Project. And because I believe that we have to spark a societal conversation and much more research on the topic. scientific research and process research, how to work with that. I think, and I also believe that that's going to be the next big wave in the one of the next big waves in the whole healing and therapy world. Yeah.
It's very interesting. And I know exactly what you're talking about. There have been times when I've traveled different places and you can feel the energy that is left over at a place from whatever trauma that's happened there. And either you feel like you can't breathe, or it feels extremely sad, or whatever the case is. And so it's interesting to dive into that and look at that more, because I think people experience that and then think it's their own stuff and not realize it's collective.
That's right. And that actually a lot of individual suffering actually goes back to like a transgenerational wiring of a collective trauma impact that happened in different cultures. And actually, in fact, if we really like put it into more concrete words, like we all are used to the kind of this lovely blue marble or sphere that floats through the universe when we see it from outer space, the planet. But actually the planet doesn't look really like that. When we look at it closer, is that the planet, in many parts of the planet, has scars, well, wounds, like big wounds, like the Second World War is a huge wound throughout Europe. And it has many after effects in many generations, and it affects the Middle East. So it's kind of an organism that has many scars, and we have been born into scar tissue. And I think that's very important, that often when we look at individual suffering, that we think, oh, it's our issue, but actually it goes back into a kind of a collective field. And I think also in the current trauma work and trauma research that the social dimension, when a trauma happens within a cultural trauma, then the cultural environment is a very important aspect to consider in the individual healing work. And so that's why I think that's a big topic. And as you said, we can feel it. We can when we pay attention and we are very present, we can still feel the remnants or the residues and the kind of leftovers that we feel. But it's actually in the follow-up generations already wired in our bodies, in our emotions. We get it through kind of, I'm convinced that through our genetic or epigenetic environment. We get it through our families, our social structures, and that some of the structures that we call normal social structures are actually trauma agreements. And so I think that's, as you can hear, I'm kind of passionate about it, because I think there's so much healing and so much awakening and so much, even if you just look at climate change, like the slowness of our response to an immediate issue that we are not facing really as a global society. The delay is partly also like trauma, that trauma doesn't want to change. Trauma is scared to change. We cannot push trauma to change. And so when we see in organizations or in societies, when there's a necessity to change and to kind of shift into new ways of doing things, I believe some of the sand in the engine that we encounter is actually unrecognized trauma that feels like a break in the system. And so I think it's a vital topic, and it comes up now where climate change and the technology explosion is like two global massive change factors come up. And I think that's our global healing process that's needed now.
Well, it's interesting. I've heard it once described it, a lot of times before there's profound change, we'll have periods of time where things seem to be in utter chaos. And I know some people feel like that's how our world is today, but, maybe you can just touch on this, but, maybe it's because we're on that cusp of profound change.
For sure. And that the global external brain, like the World Wide Web, what enables us to have this conversation and actually meet from all around the world and share like a virtual intimate space. That very technology created kind of a bigger system around humanity. like an information system that is on the one hand amazing because it allows us to do what we do. There's a lot of global learning. There's a much higher speed of data. I mean, the world really benefits on the one hand, and on the other hand, there are so many trauma impulses. There's so much information that we cannot digest. And we actually, I think if you're really honest, many of us cannot even digest the news that we consume, and also many of the atrocities. You hear about terror attacks and shooting in schools and all kinds of atrocities. It seems like that we are mentally more informed, but I don't think that we are emotionally and bodily capable of digesting the information that we get. And this leads to like a higher activation. And then if somebody anyway is already traumatized, all this information actually creates a much higher pressure, which creates higher rates of burnout, higher rates of kind of psychological issues, health issues. So that's the polarization between the innovative capacity that we see in the world and the kind of the trauma struggle. The trauma impulses also travel with high speed around the planet. I think that's something that needs kind of an inner art of living, that in order to live in that time sustainably and in a good way, so that we find ways to digest. Because if we don't digest, if we are not able to feel what we read, we actually didn't really read it. Mm-hmm. Because if we are overloaded mentally, we are just congested, but we are not really global witnesses. Because caring comes when we feel. Caring doesn't come when we just mentally understand. And I think that's a big question, that because I think that creates some kind of disruption or some kind, and the technology revolution will create a lot of societal change, as most probably climate change will do. And so I think this is the time where we need this kind of inner stability to be willing and able to be part of a change capacity, like to really embody the capacity to change. And I believe that's crucial for our world, that we can be participants in the change that is needed in order to, respond to the current challenges. And I think that inner practice or spiritual practice and inner stability, presence, relatedness, like one of the spiritual practices in culture is relation or process awareness. So all of it, I think, are very important capacities that make us also creative leaders in kind of uncertain times.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, I mean, because you also have the timeless wisdom training that you do, and I think that this dovetails nicely with what we've been talking about.
That's right. Yeah, we call it timeless wisdom because we combine, in a way, the contemplative wisdom that is around already, I mean, for thousands of years, and then we combine it with integration work. We look at like individual development and how to integrate the difficulties that we face so that our spiritual practice doesn't become a bypass, that we don't run away from our worldly difficulties, but that we really gain resources and capacities that our spiritual practice strengthens us to be even more responsible kind of citizens here on this planet. And, but also that we are citizens that transcend our current notion of identity, our current notion of what we are identified with, and that we open ourselves to kind of a higher creativity or kind of connectedness with everything. And so, yeah, it's a very good package that takes us through the kind of individual development, intimate relationship development, us as a cultural participant, as a participant in the world's process, and the spiritual practice. And it's a 2-year, very intensive dive. I have a big team of trained therapists and psychologists that come with me, and it's something that we run already more than 10 years, and it's a very, very intense and deep and transformational program. So I'm very happy with that program. And we have big groups and kind of a deep process with it. And we did it I think this is the 5th time that we run this program. Before it was even 3 years, and then we reduced it to 2 years. And we're already running the 2nd program in the US. We have 5 programs in Germany. So yeah, it's a very beautiful and also demanding process.
Well,
over 2 years.
Yeah, with any spiritual education, it does seem like it's always a demanding process.
That's right. You're right. Yeah. And I want to add something to what you said, because I think you said something very wise now that also kind of clarifies a little bit kind of the face that spirituality gets in the modern world and also in the capitalistically oriented world. Is like we often see spirit as something that we can consume quickly, and we expect this kind of fast, miraculous changes in our life. Whereas all the really deep wisdom traditions tell us that, like, to commit to a path is a commitment. Like, it's a path, because it's like we really, in a way, change a lot of our interior environments in order to liberate ourselves and to liberate, like, our core intelligence. And that, as you said, that this is on the one hand demanding, and it's on the other hand, it's also like a path, like a good wine that gets better like the older it gets. And that the spiritual path, a serious spiritual path, is a commitment. It's something that we walk for the rest of our life, or lives, if you want to see it that way. So yeah, that was very important what you said.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, and I know that you have these, you have a workshop coming up in California. So that one, I believe, because I was looking just to see, because you're in the U.S., which doesn't happen very often. And I believe you have a workshop in California coming up for the Timeless and the Timeless Training Workshop, the Timeless Wisdom Training. And you also have an event coming up in New York, Celebrate Life Festival. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, we did, like, this is the 15th festival that we did, like, that we do. We did 14 of them in Germany. This is an event where I think last year we had 1,400 participants, and so yeah, it's a kind of a stage where I invite also other teachers or speakers in different fields, and we explore certain topics. Every year has a different topic, and this year it's the first time in the US. It's at Omega Institute in upstate New York, and it's going to be in August, on the 12th till the 17th of August. And it's kind of a beautiful atmosphere, because it's also for families with kids. It's that we have a main stage, we have different workshops, we have like a whole process over the course of these 5 days. And we look at, like, what does inner and outer fragmentation mean? As you said, we're in a world where there's a lot of polarization, there's a lot of othering, there's a lot of fragmentation and separation. And we want to look at how this lives in me, how this lives in my relationships that I build, how this lives in the culture that I live in, and how this might also live in my relation to higher spirit. And so we're walking ourselves as a group and through and have some self-exploration, some relational exercises. And we call it festival because during the day we do deep work, but in the evenings we have, like, cultural programs. We have artists come, musicians, we have dance parties, we have, like, it's a good mixture of being able to have fun and also being part of a vibrant community of people that have a spiritual practice, that are culturally creative, that are leaders in their field or do meaningful projects in the world, but also come together in order to get nourished with like-minded people. It's a kind of a lovely community event, and it has a deep practice from early morning, so people can choose to participate in many different practices, events, talks, keynotes, workshops, and see how that relates to their life, and take whatever we learn in these 5 days into everybody's life at home and apply it and live it. So that's again in a nutshell. And but that's, and we got very beautiful feedback in the last years, how like the atmosphere or the energy of that event is kind of very bright. It's kind of a very uplifting event, even if you look at also some often painful or difficult things. And it creates a lovely community also for people to also meet like-minded people. Many projects are being envisioned in such a lab. It's kind of like a cultural laboratory also. And so it's a beautiful event, yeah.
Well, I think it's a fabulous event, and I'm looking into attending and highly suggest everyone do the same. Thomas, where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
Yeah, we have a whole online academy. So there's one, I think the simplest entry gate is either through my website, thomashübl.com. We have this kind of academy that has in-depth programs and also like a whole series of online content and online courses that I do on mystical principles for whatever health and healing practitioners like therapists, doctors, nurses. And then we have, courses on intimate relationship and on like the mystical teachings, like the spiritual mystical knowledge. And so we have a whole different variety of courses. And we do annual retreats. People can come to the festival. If people want to do a deep dive, we every 2 years we start a new timeless wisdom training. And I do an annual retreat in Israel over New Year's, so people can also come there, or simply connect first online and get to know me, and then see if that resonates for them, and then take it deeper.
Well, I know you have a lot of videos online, so people can learn more about you and your work, and also visit your website. We'll have the link right here. Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe one more thing to add is that, we are definitely open. We are working on this kind of non-profit initiative in many countries on collective trauma. So if anybody is interested, the Pocket Project is a very interesting platform for anybody who is interested in that. Yeah. So I also thank you, Marianne. This was a lovely conversation, and thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate that we have this time together.
Well, thank you, Thomas. It's been such a joy to spend this time with you, and of course to talk about not only modern day mysticism, but of course your upcoming event in New York, Celebrate Life Festival. So if you'd like to connect with Thomas and learn more about the event that's coming up, you can visit his website at thomashübl.com. Last name is spelled HUEBL.com. You'll find information there in regards to the event, and of course connect with him on all social media. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.